What is going on, guys? T to the M to the IDD, and I'm coming back with another video, and this time it is specifically on film cameras. Every year I try to add something new to the channel and try to challenge myself to bring different content to the channel. Now, whether that helps the algorithm or not, nobody knows, because everybody know about this freaking algorithm, right? Can't get it right. But what I wanted to share with you all is my experience with this latest film camera that I've had. Now, I have the luxury of having an older brother that shoots nothing but film. So if you look on my channel, you see a host of film cameras that he has, from the Bolex H16, Polaroid, Hasselblad. And so anytime I want to use these cameras, I can, take it at my leisure. But I want to talk to you about one specifically that I definitely recommend if you are looking into transitioning into the film photography realm. And that camera is the Pentax 645. Now, why do I think that this camera is a great film camera to start off with? There are a number of reasons, but coming from, if you're shooting the DSLR, you're shooting mirrorless, we have three primary functions that we kind of take into account. That is ISO, that's the aperture, and that is the shutter speed. Now, we want to get the best lighting that we can with any camera, any type of subject that you're trying to capture. Lighting is key. We all know that. And that is the main reason why I recommend this Pentax 645 as a great hybrid in between. And I say hybrid because of the flexibility of this camera. I believe it's somewhere in between strictly film and strictly DSLR and mirrorless. I believe this camera is somewhere in between, which makes it a great transition if you want to go full film. And the reason why I feel like it is in between those is for the mere fact that you do not need a light meter. This Pentax 645 actually has an internal light meter that gives you the exposure. So we know that this feature is in our DSLRs, it's in our mirrorless cameras. And film cameras, what do you need? You have to have your handy dandy light meter to meter for the light so that you can get all of your settings correct. So when I used this camera, I was happy because the internal lighting mechanism actually gives you a rating. And so that rating is, if you're evenly exposed, it tells you okay inside of the viewfinder. And then you get +1, +2, +3, which tells you you're overexposed by +3, and then you get -1, -2, -3, which is the reverse. You are underexposed by -3. And so depending on the camera, you start to get a feeling for this. So for example, this camera, I was actually shooting +1 overexposed, and I specifically shot like that because my brother said, hey, I've noticed when I've taken photos with this camera, they come underexposed a bit, so I typically shoot +1. Now, there are techniques for handling this if you are new to film photography, and that is called pushing and pulling your film. And so when you push your film, you typically leave it in the developer longer if it's underexposed, and pulling is just the opposite. And so the key things that I like is that you kind of drive this film camera based on your needs. So this particular camera here, I actually have the 75mm on here. And of course, everything is manually focused. The shots that I got, love the shots that I got. But some of the key things that I do want to point out is that, yes, you can control your shutter speed and you can control your f-stop, but the constant variable with this camera is that you cannot control your ISO. So you have your film that already has a ISO, speed, grain, etc. And so with this camera, the photos that I took, I used Portra 800. Now, I probably would have liked to have 400, but we already had 800 loaded in, so I just went ahead and used the 800. And so what that does is you actually still dial your ISO into the camera. And so when I dial my ISO, I basically would turn it on, go to ISO, and increase the ISO to 800. What that actually does is help the light meter actually meter the light correctly. Because if I had 400 in here and then I metered it for 800, then you can see that you will have that exposure difference, and so your photos wouldn't come out as you would like them. So once you dial in your ISO, you know that that's going to be a constant variable, and so you don't have to touch your ISO no more. So the two other variables that you can change is the shutter speed and your f-stop. And so generally, if you want to try to get that nice exposure, then you play with your f-stop and you play with the shutter speed. The f-stop, depending on the lens, this you can get all the way up to f22. Yes. And then the lowest is f2.8. So that gives you some flexibility. And then with the shutter speed, you can get all the way up to about 1200, I believe. Let's see. Yes. Okay. And so you got exposure compensation. So that is the big difference. So about 1600 shutter speed on here, just to clarify that with this camera. But that gives you some flexibility between the shutter and the f-stop, since you cannot control your ISO. I was fortunate enough, even with ISO 800 film in this camera, I was able to still shoot some daylight. You have to be strategic about it. But also, you know, if you're looking for maybe trying to get some bokeh at f2.8, but I got ISO 800 in here, might not work out too well, because I don't have the best film in to compensate to try to get that lower f-stop. So same typical things that kind of go with the DSLR and mirrorless, but I wanted to share my experience with this Pentax 645 and wanted to let everyone know it can be scary sometimes just going straight to film. Sometimes when you hear it, you gotta meter everything, because a lot of people don't know how to use a light meter. And so to help with that transition, I thought it would be good to mention this film camera, or like I said, hybrid in between, because of the internal lighting meter, for those who are looking to get into film. So great camera, love the build, the focusing, even though it's manual focus, it was still beautiful. I was still able to get my shots in focus without a problem with the 75 mil. But let me know, you into film photography? Did you start film photography, or did you start regular, digital photography and transition? Where do you fall in line? Great film camera here. T to the M to the IDD. Peace.